It was April of 1968. I was a junior in high school, and on my way home from baseball practice, I stopped at my grandmother's house to get some of her famous sweet potato pie. And I saw her sitting at her dining room table with tears in her eyes, which I had never seen before. My grandmother was a strong woman. I'd never seen her cry before. And when I questioned her about her tears, she simply responded by saying, "They shot Dr. King today." I was 16 years old, and that's how I found out about the death of Martin Luther King Jr. And at that moment, I decided that whoever Dr. King was, I had heard his name and I'd seen him, but I didn't really understand why his life would mean so much to my grandmother. And I decided that whoever he was, I was going to live the kind of life that would cause my life to impact someone's life the way Dr. King's life impacted my grandmother's life. And so from that day until now, I've involved myself in activities, I've joined organizations, I've had jobs, I accepted a call to the ministry, and have done everything I could to be a life that's impactful on other people's lives, particularly those who are poor and those who need a hand up in life. I am DeForest Soaries Jr. My friends call me Buster. And I am the senior pastor of the First Baptist Church of Lincoln Gardens in Somerset, New Jersey, where I have served since November of 1990. Martin Luther King had a mentor named Reverend Dr. Samuel DeWitt Proctor. And Dr. Proctor went to the seminary that Dr. King attended and helped guide him through that experience. Dr. Proctor got his doctorate degree from the same university that Dr. King did, and being one of the few African Americans who had that experience, they became very close. And so Sam Proctor was my professor when I was doing my master's work and my mentor when I did my doctoral work. He became my mentor, and he had been Dr. King's mentor. And Sam Proctor was the most impactful person other than my dad on my life and in my life. After I finished high school and went to college, I became an activist. For me, the work of Martin Luther King Jr. needed to continue, that although laws were passed that leveled the playing field, as it were, in so many social areas, there was still work to be done. There were still gaps, there were still needs. And so I got involved in civil rights as an activist, traveling the country, organizing campaigns and efforts and protests. But I arrived at a point where I felt that protest was not how I wanted to spend the rest of my life, because protest is designed to point out problems. And I didn't want to spend all of my life just pointing out problems. I wanted to be a part of solving problems, and therefore flip the switch, as it were, in my life, still wanting to make a difference, but more on the solution side than the protest side. And so I describe myself as a problem solver, as a pastor, as a leader, as a business person. When I was growing up watching black and white television, all of the images of black people on television were negative, derogatory, ignorant, violent. And the images of scholarship, the founding of colleges and institutions of higher learning, the discoveries and inventions just weren't in the textbooks. And so growing up in America without Black history suggests that Blacks were only slaves or only criminals, or later on only athletes and entertainers. But there's a rich legacy of Black entrepreneurship and ownership of businesses. There's a rich heritage of Blacks even in government and politics. We've been there all the time. And so when Black History Month comes around, for Black people, it's a reminder that our heritage is much broader and deeper than just slavery, and we have a lot to be proud of. For non-Blacks, it's a point of discovery. It's the realization that although you haven't heard many of the names, but people like Daniel Hale Williams and people like Booker T. Washington and others uh, not only made contributions to Black America, but made contributions to America. That in medicine and in science and technology, the presence and participation of Blacks is meaningful. And so it's a discovery, and it allows non-Blacks to have a different, rather a broader perception of who Black people are. But I think the larger message, which is the message that I carry with me in my speeches throughout Black History Month, is this: that the conditions that Black people suffered in America are simply an example of how every group of humans, every ethnic group, every subgroup of women, every nationality, every group in the history of humanity has had its barriers and its challenges. It doesn't matter what country you go to, it doesn't matter what point in history you're in, there's always a group that has obstacles as it relates to realizing their full potential. And what's interesting about history is to see how people address those obstacles, how people responded, in light of those obstacles. And so Black history, I think, in the largest possible way, says to people who may be physically challenged, people who may be financially poor, people who may be incarcerated, having made some mistakes, it says to people that if Black Americans could persist through the various challenges faced, placed in our path during our history, then any group should be inspired to believe that you too can rise from where you are to where you have the potential to be. So that for me is Black history. I want to be remembered as a person that served and solved problems. I want someone to be able to describe me as having participated in a strategy that solved a problem somewhere for somebody.